Hello and welcome to another episode of the Renewable Energy Movement powered by Kigyo. Today we've got Barrie Davies. Barrie is 15 years in the renewable energy sector, working in a variety of different countries and territories globally. Now running a couple of operations, new energy, beyond green, that I would place as at the forefront of kind of technology within utilities, energy, clean tech space. How's that for an intro, Barrie? Anything you want to add?
No, Tom, that's about right. I think any more than the 15, I tend to feel a little bit older, so we'll leave it at the 15 years for now. But yeah, all is well on my side. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Good to have you on. Let's start at the very beginning, Barrie, as we do.
Oh.
How do you get into the energy space?
Yeah, it's a kind of a sordid tale. I'm only joking. I think in reality, I started off coming from the investor side of the marketplace. I worked in kind of a large investment house, looking at commodity side of the businesses, and looking at from an analyst perspective of how steel, energy, glass, silicon was traded at the time, and got a little bit kind of, I guess, disencouraged by the finance markets in that era, in that space. And took a step aside and moved into renewables. Kind of stepped into a kind of sales director of a kind of a commercial and industrial business, kind of built up their team, secured 10, 15 megawatt, which at the time was major, back, 20 years ago, it was fairly substantial. And then came from there, transitioned across to some manufacturers, hold national and kind of directorship roles, kind of lived the road life for a long time. And the up and down motorways in the UK, then it transitioned to across kind of European airspaces, and then it changed to global airspaces. So I think from the transition of Hanergy, Solar Frontier, Jinko, Trina, GCL, through that transition, I kind of took on a myriad of roles and took on a myriad of different facets, built teams, made some great friends, and got to understand a whole lot about the space and about where it's going in the next few years. And for me, built up a passion for the people in it.
Yeah, I mean, let's maybe dive in at Jinko, because I guess that would have timed fairly well with a bit of a, let's say, almost boom or pickup within the sector.
Mm-hmm.
How were things back then, and what was your kind of overall scope like?
Within Jinko, I was UK director, and covering off the majority of the investment fund access throughout Europe. I think I often look back at Jinko and think it was kind of working with Frank Endorf and Demetrius and Ada and Daniel and Maria and the team that was there at the time as being one of the great, you have pivotal moments in your career about people you work with and who influences you. And across those periods, they had a significant impact on me in terms of how I look upon things and where I've come from and how I graded future organizations I worked with, and also how I graded myself in future kind of territories and how I kind of like to be heralded. So I think a lot could be said for that team. They're a great group of people and a great group of individuals. And we were very successful. We built a good ethos there. We built a good infrastructure. I've got to have a knack of networking, and I managed to network through each of my roles in terms of building a strong connection with the majority of players in the world.
No. And what were you doing in terms of like a megawattage at that time in the UK?
I don't know, 400-500 megawatt per annum, something like that from UK players, not solely within UK, kind of across the European market with clients like, Solar Century, Light Source, kind of Lark, BSR, fairly substantial clients at the time, but in their heyday, they were the leaders of the marketplace. It was before the period of kind of investment infrastructure houses like Next or Low Carbon was there, but not in the same sphere as the more EPC led. They were, because again, at that time, within the PV module side of the business, you didn't really have interaction with the investment side. I think because of where I came from, I was one of the first to interact on the investor side within the space globally. I saw it as a way to strategically build up a different kind of relationship. And I've kept that relationship to today. So I feel confident moving into any scale of portfolio or any investor or any conversation around any type of business.
Yeah.
Because of the amount of time I've spent building substantial frameworks with majors in the world.
And do you think that comes from your background, the time that you spent in roles before then, or?
I think it came a little bit from that, and I think it comes a little bit from my sporting background, because I'm quite personable, but I've also got an end goal in everything I do. There's never not an objective, and investment is always objective led.
Just we were talking a little bit offline about your ability to grow and put teams together and things like that. Back at Jinko, how did the kind of team grow, or how did you put a team together over that period? Did it grow significantly or stay a similar size?
It was it was Jinko was primarily UK based, so we had a team of 3 in the UK. We grew that team from zero to 3. But I wouldn't put that down as a kind of a growth space. For growth, I think that was just in the period where marketplaces were growing naturally. So kind of headcount grew naturally. There was no attributable. We couldn't go to market for headcount then, because really in the sector headcount didn't exist, because there were more players than they were players playing. There was a different sphere. That all changed, as I transitioned into Trina and other roles. But in Jinko, I think it was more about building, or from my side personally, it was more about building my ethos, my brand, my structuring, my understanding of the space, and the knowledge of where I was going to go over the next decade.
Yeah, interesting. And then, to use your words, to go from the motorways of the UK to the airways of Europe, I guess your next role at Trina was quite significant in the sense that you were still looking to build these strategic relationships with investors, but over a much wider scale.
Yeah, I think kind of within Trina, we eventually started stepping into the US and what have you. We grew the team from 2 people when I joined to near enough 50 people over the space of 3 years. We grew the team, we grew the infrastructure, I changed process, we changed how we built pipelines, how we understood kind of developers as well as investors and EPCs, how we grew that kind of ethos on, okay, so today this is, there's a small, medium, large, but also a short, midterm, long-term view of any market.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of to give you a kind of an analytical perspective of the clean tech businesses, back in 2010 to 15, maybe 16, the space was, redevelopment was very silent generally, right? Aside from the guys that owned and operated, and as Lightsource came through, and kind of RWE and IBVO came out of Germany, and you had other players coming in different markets at different periods and doing different things, but largely the developer was unseen to a point. 16 was the space where developers became visible, but it wasn't until 18 the developers began signing direct frameworks, and so spawned the IPP piece. So within Trina, we designed a team that was kind of in 2 layers, kind of rhetoric business, that is kind of, smaller portfolios, EPC, project by project business, and then the most strategic accounts, your light sources, NLs, EDFs, Totals, your RWEs, the major, the Vattenfalls, ScarTech, and the real influential businesses across the marketplace. And what was essential for us at that period of time was that we took an understanding of what every client type needed, because from my side, PV sales has always been, and this is no disrespect to people that do it on a day-to-day, but PV sales was always a little bit left foot, right foot. As long as you did the process, it ended up being kind of a relationship game that as long as you completed the process, you were okay. But we changed that, because after we began to change that, I feel very proud of the fact that I think we changed the space for the better in terms of giving. We began the change towards IPP in Europe at that point. And I think that is something I'm very proud of.
And your team obviously grew significantly in that period. How many countries are we talking about here? Do you have people scattered all over Europe, or is it one or two hubs?
Yeah. Every market across Europe.
Yeah. And how do you find that kind of culturally managing and working with all these different cultures?
I think me personally, fine. Other people have more challenges. I think other people have more challenges with the with getting an understanding culturally of people.
Mm-hmm.
I've always, again, comes back to kind of from the investment days and then from sport. I lived in Tokyo when I was 16 for 3 years. I lived in Holland for a while doing judo. I'd lived other places and seen other things. So although I hadn't seen and lived everything, and by far wasn't the most culturally adept of people I've met over the years, but I felt as if I came into that with an advantage because my core objective is always to build success in people.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to make Tom the best Tom.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't. I want Tom, and I can still go back over the majority of people I've ever worked, who have ever worked with me, and they still now want to work with me. And that's a rarity.
Having that genuine authenticity to intrinsically care about the other person, which I suppose internally will then allow you to deal with cultural insensitives or things like that. Yeah.
Well, you just don't see culture or you color or creed, right? Doesn't exist when you just treat people as humans.
Yeah.
And that comes down to, I guess, how you're raised, where you're raised, what you've learned, how you've learned it, and the kind of value you put on the human pound as it goes. The kind of the real stopgap for me with people is everyone's got to be treated fairly. There's got to be an understanding amongst everyone that everyone gets an equal and an opposite reaction to what they put on.
Yeah. Can completely agree. Yeah. Let's fast forward a little bit kind of to today, because you've got a couple of ventures, I think, or 2 or 3 different ventures that are really interesting that I'm sure you can do a little bit better justice than I will. But yeah, tell us what your kind of main focus is right now.
Well, I think there's actually, so we say two or three. There's one core focus in the middle of all of that. So with it Beyond Green is a platform that we're using to understand the carbon markets more. Mm-hmm. So for all intents and purposes, I believe, and we're putting an awful lot of capital investment into the fact that carbon is the next Series A kind of big time raise. It's kind of, I think it's the economy of the future, or at least part of the economy of the future. And I think that's where it's going. I think people just need to, if they don't like it or don't understand it, learn. And if they don't want to learn or understand it, then they get out of the way, kind of thing. I think it's got to be a case of it's coming, and you've got to kind of understand where it's going for it to be successful. And I think that carbon has a myriad of kind of entities. Carbon in terms of everyone's made up of carbon to a certain extent. Carbon in much as carbon abatement will save the planet to a point, or at least slow its degradation, and carbon as an economy. Mm-hmm. So it's a triple-edged piece. So that's one thing, and that's something I'm doing kind of and has been building in the background for the past 3 years. So that's there. New energy is I guess a consultancy base where I go in and I impact change management and change revolutions within businesses. So last year, I had a project last year with New Energy with Schletter, where I took on Schletter and their global VP role. I went in to impact the change that they were going through. They were going through an install buyout and many other things internally. So I went in to kind of impact and control, and worked with the CSO, the CEO, CFO, to ensure that we were maximizing output while minimizing kind of deflection on the teams. So that was exciting and super interesting. And since then, in January, February this year, we teamed up with the guys at Labora and Seagen, and with a distinct view on creating a more downstream product.
Yeah.
A more kind of energy integrated, which kind of floats into my Beyond Green ethos in kind of carbon and kind of the real goal. And as time has moved on, I see that as the epitome of where we're going, and it's kind of where my focus is. At the moment, I've got other pieces that are floating around the the piece. I work with a lot of EPCs, I work with a lot of investors, I work with a lot of other integral parts of the space, but those are the kind of the key, the link chain pieces for me. We're kind of going through the process currently on the investment side of bringing a different kind of investor into the space, so that the debt equity bridge for financing projects is the biggest challenge. So having equity on board, so you can actually go out to market and really develop and really change and really make significant impact, is one thing. And that's the hardest piece of money to find. So that's the bit that goes, I want to buy freedom, right? I want to buy freedom for my business to go and grow and build whatever we need to build and however we need to build it. And sometimes that equity bridge is sometimes more of, I guess, you do this, I do this kind of thing. It's more of an exchange than it is anything else. And that exchange has a cost generally, either be it equity or returns or stakeholdership. So our aim at the present second is changing how capital is brought into the market.
And I suppose that ties in nicely, or that connects to how you used to do business when you were working for your Jinkos and for your Trinas, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am now. I've never been happier in kind of where the industry is and where I'm going than I am now.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of this. People are disheartened at the present second in a lot of what's happening in the space, because of, there's this change and that change, and kind of there's a lot of unsteady people out there at the present second. If I had only one message for anyone in the space right now, it's to dig deep, hang tight, because this space is going to grow and it's going to blossom beyond where it is currently. And it won't be the same as it was yesterday, because it can never be the same as it was yesterday. Yesterday is gone.
100%. As we're recording this podcast today, the podcast that we released was with Jan Rossenau. Jan is an Oxford professor and a pretty senior voice in the space, and we had exactly this conversation. There's a lot of doom and gloom, particularly when it comes to politics, particularly when it comes to administrations, but it's in a longer term, there's no way it's going to affect what ultimately will be, definitely the forefront of energy in the future. Going back to Beyond Green, what's your? I think it's really cool how kind of strategic and at the forefront of the market technically you are. What's your kind of vision, a long-term vision for Beyond Green?
I think I get people with I sometimes get people with this in terms of, if I go to the end goal of the end vision for this, it's a decentralized market. It's a kind of an energy empowerment for all. The vision is anyone can turn on a light switch, right? So the reality is it's whether it's peer-to-peer trading, whether it's carbon economized markets, allowing for renewables to be put out in the market space at a lower cost, meaning more people can afford it, meaning there's more energy in the space, lower energy costs, transmission costs decrease, energy infrastructure and strain the grid becomes less and less of a product of economy. And more of a byproduct of not utilizing the energy we have. So Beyond Green's place in that will be to sit there as a pioneer in this space, but looking at it from an IT perspective. So we'll be using kind of software kind of gambits, mostly driven by AI optimization at grid level, and then a peer-to-peer trading system amongst BESS and EVs to kind of flatten out kind of indispensable or dispensable kind of grid overcapacity. So the aim eventually will be to create a more kind of carbon braided kind of infrastructure that actually has a back end of carbon economy. So it uses the carbon economy at the back end to kind of benefit the everyman.
Yeah, I love that. Anyone can turn on a light switch. It's really powerful. Can you tell us a bit more about the carbon economy? I mean, what is it as high on kind of governmental agendas? Is it with the big players in the space, or?
Well, I think for the majority, it's not high enough. I think if I was to kind of I think carbon, we were speaking yesterday with our board, and carbon's been on everyone's list as a driver for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, more maybe. But no one's, some organizations have made piecemeal efforts to reduce their carbon impact and to kind of regain, and there is a carbon market to an extent, which by far is biggest in Europe. There's still a huge kind of vector gap between where we need to be and where we are. And the reason for that is, number one, it's all about kind of proof and evidence-based. So we're working with one of our partners currently to create an evidentiary-based system that runs kind of a P99. So it's 99.97% accurate in terms of carbon origin of offset, which means the actual offset of energy can be bankable. So you can actually offset carbon with 100% reliability. You pair that with we're working with another organization now in terms of hedging the carbon credit, not just the price of carbon.
Yeah.
So you pair everything together and put it together in an app, in a kind of a function seamless way. Then all of a sudden you've got a place where everyone's accountable, you and I and every corporate and every government, and everyone therefore has to have a strategy. And that's where Siege and Laboro Group and that kind of organization coming into that space and actually putting together strategic actions is hugely impactful.
And are you focusing this, or is this focused on particular regions or countries? Or?
Well, I mean, it depends on which part of that. The actual piece with the group with Siegen would be kind of a global focus, but beginning in the UK. Beyond Green is South Africa and UK. And I think the majority of the other things are centric into Europe. So we're starting off at homeland as much as possible, or at least in the lands where we can control the infrastructure around it. And then it just expands from there. So I think from my side, from my personal opinion, there's 5 to 10 years of growth in the clean tech space before we even reach kind of anywhere close to saturation. It just means I think we've got 12 months now of change, an adaptation to a different normal, which is fine, because there's never a normal as such in history. There's always been today and tomorrow, or today and yesterday, and they're always different. So there's no such thing as normal. It's just gradients of change. Kind of, it's like the kind of the old kind of physics metric. It's that you can change 0.1% per day, and eventually that becomes 1,000% change.
Yeah.
A grain of sand eventually makes a mountain.
Yeah.
It's just about that stage by stage change.
Yeah. And how do you envisage, or how do you visualize the change in the coming years?
I don't think our grid and infrastructure will upgrade the way it needs to cope with EV and data center and the kind of huge energy uptake we must have. So whether it be SMR, creating a base load locality, and then followed up with more traditional energy, PV, wind, hydro, kind of waste to energy around that. I don't see these massive energy power plants as being a way forward for the long term.
Yeah.
I think kind of in the mid stay, it's going to be more about fragmented energy that kind of compared with either hydrogen or battery or both, or kind of similar solid state storage, and the wrap of that together and actually creating kind of a solid kind of infrastructure around space is actually that it's funny we get there, because we're now working with data centers and discussing grid central connections in terms of how do we create a infrastructure around a data center or around any mass requirement of energy, whether it be EV charging for haulage or data centers or whatever your dice. How do we create that and actually flow into a space where that doesn't have an impact on you and I and the general public? So if someone's gonna be agreed some mass kind of exodus on energy for the market, then I think it's only right that paired with that has to be the infrastructure for the energy.
Yeah.
So say let's say Elon or kind of one of the other kind of AI giants come across and they want to build a kind of a vector data center. So it would take 500 megawatts or more of power consistently to run, which means you'd need 1.5 gigawatts or more of PV. So how do you know, and is so if these people are, if the ethos isn't ground up, so if your project isn't a project from kind of roots to stems, if you're not the whole way through, and your only place is how do I get it to grid, and then how do I fund it at grid, then you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that whole changing that piece there and making the municipality and the individual developer of that project make them responsible for the energy generation, and that
Yeah.
changes the market humongously.
It changes it massively, yeah, because there's, like you say, infrastructurally is where the majority of issues seem to arise, right? Whether it be a particular grid connection or, like you say, a PV plant or a wind farm that is unable to, producing too much electricity for the connection, etc. They're all infrastructure problems that we're talking about. It's almost like the tech is moving too quick in a weird way.
Well, I mean, I would probably say that the tech is moving quick enough, but the wheels are turning too fast.
Okay, yeah,
So,
fair enough.
So I would say that if we could catch up with supply demand from a tech perspective, to actually manage, because again, our grid it needs an update, right? And every country globally is the same largely. There's China, which is a slightly different animal in terms of grid setup and kind of how that operates. And there are markets with a bigger or better handle on it than us, than us being UK and Europe.
Yeah.
But I think on the whole, it's more about creating the right level of baseload, and when something takes it fragment, as above that baseload that's currently there, there has to be an onus of responsibility to plug that gap and have a structure and a plan and an optimization to plug that gap, and then the costs associated. I mean, listen, that's a perfect world mantra, right? So it's you create a problem, you solve a problem. It's not kind of it's not high level business by any perspective, but at least it's a start.
Yeah, indeed. Barrie, I think, yeah, like I say, I find it really interesting that the work that you do and the visions that you have. Where can people follow your work?
So we're on LinkedIn, both Beyond Green, Seagen, and New Energy. We have a YouTube channel launching on the 1st of September. We're launching our social media Twitter accounts directly generating. It's to generate political and public appeal towards carbon and energy and the mindsets around it.
We'll include the links in the publications for this episode. Really excited to follow the journey. Probably going to go away and do a little bit of reading up on carbon and where that can take us as well. And yeah, thanks for coming on. Anything you want to add, Barrie?
No, that's it. Hey, just a thank you to you and to everyone else for the patience. I know this hasn't been easy to pin me down. So thank you to everyone and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you very much.